Welcome back, amazing thinkers. I'm Sue Sabelli, your Great Minds teacher. Let's see what we need for today. Today we'll need the Buffalo Are Back, handout 3A, your journal, your pencil, and some scissors. Pause here to gather what you need, and then just hit play when you're ready to continue. People, plants, and animals are connected in so many ways. Today, we'll be exploring some of those connections. What does looking at connections between people, plants, and animals reveal to us or show us? Today, we'll be exploring connections between different people, buffalo, and the prairie. You'll be pausing here to grab handout 3A and your scissors. Once you have those materials, please cut the cards out on the dotted lines. We'll be using these cards again, so when we're finished with today's lesson, remember, keep the cards and keep them together. Pause here to cut out the cards on the dotted lines. If you do not have this sheet, you can also use scrap paper to make your own cards. Just be sure to include the label. Pause here to cut or to create your own cards, and then just hit play when you're ready to continue. Let's begin by taking a look at the topic-specific vocabulary or the labels on these cards. We have the government, settlers, buffalo, President Theodore Roosevelt, American Indians, prairie, the grasses. Pause here to make sure that you have your cards spread out in front of you, either on a table or on the floor, so you can easily see each picture and read each label. Just hit play when you're ready to continue. As I read parts of the Buffalo Are Back, I want you to pull out the cards that connect to this part of the story. Ready? Here we go. The Indians who lived on the plains were setting the grasses ablaze, as they had for thousands of years. The fire was good for the prairie. The calf may have been afraid of the flames, but they kept the trees from taking over the grasslands. The fire's ashes put nutrients into the soil, making the grass healthier for the buffalo that ate it. As you were listening, you probably heard the word Indians, prairie, grasslands, and even buffalo. What I'd like you to do is pause here to think about how these three pictures are connected based on the evidence from this text. Take plenty of time to think about the connection and to chat about the connection with a learning partner. Then just hit play when you're ready to continue. We learned in the text that the Indians set the grasses ablaze, and they did that for thousands of years. The fire was good for the prairie. It kept the trees from overtaking the grasslands, and the fire's ashes put nutrients into the soil, and that made the grass healthier for the buffalo that ate it. Let's keep reading, and be sure to choose the cards when you hear those words in the text. Ready? Here we go. Early settlers were ranchers and cowboys. They brought fences and cattle to the plains. The cattle did not roam, so they ate too much of the grass within their fences. Their flat hooves packed the earth. Air and rainwater no longer reached into the soil. Later, settlers wanted to farm the land, so they tore out the grass and planted crops to sell. When the buffalo lived on the prairie, their sharp hooves helped rain reach deep into the earth. and the tough roots of the grass held in the wet. Now, no moisture remained in the soil. The farmer's crops withered and died. What connections did you hear? Pause here to put your cards together and also to have a chat with your learning partner. Scroll back if you'd like to listen to it again and move those cards around. Connect them to each other based on the evidence in the text. Just hit play when you're ready to continue. When you read the whole text aloud with your classroom teacher, you learned about the connection between the buffalo and the settlers. The settlers were encouraged to shoot the buffalo. Therefore, many of the buffalo disappeared from the prairie. Because the settlers had an impact on the buffalo, they also had an impact on the prairie. I'd like you to pause here to chat with your learning partner about the connection between the settlers and the prairie. Just hit play when you're ready to continue. We learned from the text that the settlers brought fences and cattle to the plains, and the cattle did not roam. They ate too much of the grass within their fences, and the cattle had flat hooves that packed the earth. Those hooves were not sharp. The air and the rainwater no longer reached into the soil, and the crops withered and died. Let's explore another connection. Make sure you have your cards ready. Here we go. Roosevelt established the National Bison Range in Montana and made it illegal to shoot buffalo. Over the years, more land was set aside in western states for the great grazing herds, which were beginning to grow. The government worked to save the prairie. Farmers were taught to plant and grow crops in curves instead of straight lines. The contour plowing helped to prevent dirt from blowing away. Government workers planted trees with deep roots to hold moisture in the soil and break the wind. When the rains returned, farmers planted grass between their curving rows of corn to hold the soil in place. Crops flourished again. Pause here to group your cards together in order to make a connection. Also, talk about your connection out loud, either with me or with a learning partner. Scroll back on the timeline if you'd like to listen to it again, and then just hit play when you're ready to continue. Here are the cards for President Roosevelt, the buffalo, and the prairie. Please point to each card as you describe the connection between these cards. Be sure to use evidence from the text. Pause here to practice that. Take as much time as you need, and then just hit play to continue. We learned in the text that President Roosevelt established the National Bison Range in Montana, and that made it illegal to shoot buffalo. Over the years, more land was even set aside in western states so the herds could grow. President Roosevelt had a direct impact on the buffalo, and as a result, he also had an impact on the prairie. There's the check mark in the corner, and you know what that means. Your teacher has an opportunity to check in with you and check your understanding. So what I'd like you to do is to make a connection between the pictures and write about that connection in your journal. Remember, it's helpful if you put your pictures together first, practice it out loud, and then write your sentence in your journal. Pause here to think about a connection based on the evidence that we've read in the book. Practice your sentence out loud and then write it in your journal. Just hit play when you're ready to continue. This is a great time to take a stretch break. Pause here to do that, and then just hit play when you're ready to continue. Please read the focusing question to yourself, and then we'll read it together. How did the actions of the American Indians and early Americans impact the prairie in the American West? Today, you'll be using an evidence organizer to gather evidence from the text to help you answer this question. Please pull out the following cards: the American Indians, the settlers, and President Theodore Roosevelt. Pause here to do that, and then just hit play when you're ready to continue. Now that we have our cards, we're ready to think about how these linking words, first, then, and finally, can help us think about these people and how they connect to each other, and also how they connect to the American West. Go ahead and get your cards out so you can move them around either on a table or on the floor in front of you as we talk about the people in these pictures and when they came to the prairie. First, the American Indians came to the prairie, then the settlers, and finally the Roosevelt government. Each group had an impact on the prairie, which means they had a strong effect on the prairie. How did the American Indians have an impact on the prairie? Pause here to think about that question, to reread, or to chat with your learning partner. Just hit play when you're ready to continue. We learned in the Buffalo Are Back that the American Indians burned the grass to keep the soil and the grass healthy. How did the settlers impact the prairie? Pause here to do some thinking or to chat with a learning partner. Then just hit play when you're ready to continue. Since many of the settlers shot buffalo, there were then no hooves for healthy soil. The settlers brought cattle, and the cattle ate too much grass, and their flat hooves packed the soil. The settlers also tore out the grass to plant crops. The settlers had a strong effect on the prairie. They had an impact on the prairie. How did the Roosevelt government have an impact on the prairie? Pause here to do some thinking or to chat with a learning partner. And remember, it's always okay to go back to the book. Just hit play when you're ready to continue. President Roosevelt made a safe place for the buffalo. They made a preserve. The Roosevelt government taught farmers how to plant crops in curves instead of straight lines so they could keep the soil healthy. The Roosevelt government also planted trees so the trees and the roots of the trees would keep more moisture in the ground. The Roosevelt government had a strong effect on the prairie. The Roosevelt government had an impact on the prairie. Pause here to read over the evidence organizer and to discuss it with a learning partner. Just hit play when you're ready to wrap up our video lesson. When we explore the connections between people, plants, and animals, we can better understand our world and also the past, just like historians do. Today, you discovered many connections between the American Indians, the early Americans, and the prairie. Share that knowledge with others, and I'll see you again very soon.